Welcome to this little thing that we call the Calvary Briefing. It is June 17th, 2021. We are well into a hot summer. Here at Calvary, like many other churches, we are relearning how to be together again. The Gospel Coalition is a national organization that unites churches around the gospel, and they had an interesting article a couple of weeks back entitled, "Church Coffee Hour Just Got a Little Less Awkward." And within the article, they quoted a writer for the New Yorker by the name of Adam Gopnik, who was writing about New York City and some things that were happening there. And he writes, "Like victims of a traumatic injury relearning the steps that once seemed second nature, we are remembering how to dance again. As people in New York are beginning to gather together, they have noticed that it oftentimes feels a little awkward. This time can feel a little awkward for us in church as well, because we've had a variety of things happening. We've been separated for several months. We've been wearing masks. And now as we gather together again, it can feel a little bit awkward." Well, a guy by the name of Blake Glosson writes an article that I believe is extremely helpful for all of us to think about. And this obviously will help us here at Calvary, but I think it will help us as followers of Christ as well. Glosson's article is entitled, "The Neglected Ministry of Asking Questions." The neglected ministry of asking questions. I want you to think for a moment about someone in your life who makes you feel loved. I can almost guarantee that this person that you're thinking about asks you questions and really listens to your answers. David Augsburger once observed, "Being heard is so close to being loved that most people cannot even tell the difference. Show me a person who asks questions and listens, and I will show you a person who makes others feel known and feel loved." It makes sense, right? But what's the problem? Well, Stephen Covey, who wrote 7 Habits for Highly Effective People, wrote, "Most people don't listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply." In other words, most of us listen to people only to get to the point in the conversation when we ourselves can talk. Well, as followers of Jesus, we should be different. We should actually aim at being active listeners. Even though Jesus knew all things, and even though he knew what was inside people's hearts, it is significant to look at the Gospels, all 4 of them, and see that in all 4 Gospels we find that Jesus asked questions some 300 times. 300 times. I've talked before about how you can draw a line down the middle of the human population on earth, and you can put all people on one side or another. On one side, you've got people who are "here I am" people. They walk into a room and it's "here I am." And you can draw a line down the center of human population, and on the other side are people who walk into a room and say, "there you are." We tend to fall into one of those 2 camps. "Here I am," or "there you are." As we look at the book of Philippians, chapter 2, Paul tells us that we should strive, even if we're a "here I am" person, to work at being a "there you are" person. Paul writes of Jesus and us, and he writes this, Philippians 2, 5-8. "Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself, by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Well, this might sound good, but what are some practical ways that we can become more, there you are, people? What are some active ways that we can become active listeners? Well, Glosson in his article gives 4 suggestions, and I'm just going to leave them with you today. Suggestion number 1, be a curious person, and remember forks. Now, all of you know what a fork is. It's a utensil we use to eat. We use them every day. Remember forks. How can forks help us to be curious people? Well, if you don't know what to say to people, think in terms of forks. You can ask people about these 5 areas of their lives. Number 1, family. Number 2, occupation. Number 3, recreation. Number 4, knowledge. And number 5, spirituality. Any one of those 5 areas opens up all kinds of questions that you can ask of another person. And you can be an active listener as you hear them answer your questions. Secondly, Glosson reminds us to follow up. Try to remember questions that you've asked people, and the next week or 2 weeks later, follow up and actually let them know that you care about the questions that you asked. Ask them about their job, their occupation that you talked to them about previously, or their family, or something that's happening in their spiritual life, something that meant a lot to them from their study of the book of Ephesians, for instance. Be curious and remember forks. Follow up and ask leading questions. For instance, if you meet a couple who've been married for 10 years, you could ask them, what's the secret that you found to being married for 10 years? Or as you find out that someone has an occupation that is rather unique, you can say, how did you become qualified for such an important job? Ask a leading question that will require more than just a yes or no answer, something that will actually communicate something that's happening in this person's life. Finally, communicate love. Let people know that you care about their answers. Let people know that you care about them. Glosson ends his article by writing this: everyone has something to say, but few have the opportunity to say it, since question asking and listening are increasingly rare. The next time you meet someone, challenge yourself to ask more questions than you yourself answer. This can go a long way in making the other person feel valued, and it's one of the most powerful ways to communicate the character and the love of God. Could we all work at making church coffee time a little less awkward for the glory of God?